They told me not to go digging. They said urban legends are just stories, myths, whispers, things kids dare each other to say in the dark. But the more I listened, the more I realized something terrifying. These stories don't fade, they survive. They change, and sometimes they find you. Good evening. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere you've never been. Somewhere between history and nightmare. You've heard the names, the tales passed from friend to friend, campfire to campfire. But have you ever asked yourself why they endure? Why they travel from city to city, across generations without ever dying? I did, and I wish to God I hadn't. It started with an obsession. I've always been fascinated by folklore. As a kid, while other kids were trading baseball cards, I was sneaking into the library basement, flipping through dusty books about banshees, ghosts, and rituals people swore no one should ever attempt. Most kids outgrow that phase. I didn't. I grew up, moved to the city, got a decent job. But the stories followed me. On late nights, after scrolling past conspiracy videos and creepypasta forums, I'd always find myself staring at the same question. What if even one of them was real? That's when I met Professor Adler. He was a retired folklore historian, the kind of man who had the look of someone who hadn't slept in years. Thin, pale, eyes too sharp for his age. I found him through an old university contact, and he agreed, reluctantly, to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. When I told him I wanted to investigate urban legends firsthand, his expression tightened. "Listen to me carefully," he said, voice low, almost trembling. "Urban legends aren't just stories. They are survival machines. They adapt. They evolve. They live because people like you keep feeding them with attention. The more you dig, the closer they'll come. And once they know your name, you'll never get free." I laughed it off. But I didn't forget his words. Before he left, he slid something across the table. A leather-bound journal, cracked with age, its cover dark and rough, like it had been soaked in something that wasn't water. "This was left on my doorstep 30 years ago," he said. "It has passed from one seeker to the next, and not one of them ended well." I picked it up. The weight of it felt wrong. Heavy, but not in a physical way, as if the air around it pressed against my skin. On the cover, faintly etched, were the words, "The Ledger of Shadows." Adler looked at me with hollow eyes. "If you read it, the stories will no longer be stories. They'll be doors. And once you open a door," he didn't finish, he just walked away. I should have dropped it right there. I should have left the journal on that sticky cafe table and never looked back. But curiosity is a disease, and it had me already. That night, in my apartment, I opened the ledger. The handwriting inside was frantic, uneven, written by dozens of hands over decades. Page after page described encounters, rituals, warnings. But what unsettled me most was the way the stories weren't written like fiction. They were written like testimony, police reports, confessions, final words. And then, I saw my first entry. It was titled simply, "Bloody Mary." The words burned into my brain. I could hear kids daring each other in the bathroom mirror, chanting her name. I remembered the shiver of fear even as a child, daring myself to whisper the name once, twice. Never the third time. The ledger's entry was short. Just one line, scratched so deep into the page the paper had torn. "She comes for those who doubt her." I should have stopped there. But obsession makes fools of us all. I lit a candle. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, and with a shaking voice, I said her name. The bathroom was quiet, except for the faint hiss of the candle flame. My reflection stared back at me, pale, trembling, and uncertain. It felt stupid, childish, standing there whispering into the glass like a kid on a dare. But the moment I said her name the first time, the temperature dropped. Bloody Mary. The flame bent as if someone had exhaled across it. My throat tightened. My voice cracked as I whispered it again. Bloody Mary. The mirror darkened slightly, not enough to call it paranormal, but enough to make my stomach churn. The shadows behind me seemed heavier, thicker, and then came the third time. My lips almost refused to move, but curiosity pushed the word out of me. Bloody Mary. Silence. My reflection blinked back at me. I exhaled, laughing nervously at myself. Nothing. Just another urban legend, I thought. Maybe Adler had been messing with me, planting fear in my head so I'd hallucinate shadows. Then I saw it. In the corner of the mirror, behind my reflection, there was movement. A ripple, like water spreading in the glass. And then fingers. Pale, sharp-nailed, pressing from the inside of the mirror. I stumbled back, but the reflection didn't move the same way I did. My reflection stood still, frozen, while I staggered in panic. The candle went out, pitch black, and in that blackness, a whisper. Closer. My blood turned to ice. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to turn on the flashlight. When the screen lit up, the bathroom looked empty. Just me, breathing hard, staring at the mirror. But my reflection, it wasn't matching me anymore. Its lips were moving. It was smiling. I didn't wait to see what came next. I grabbed the candle, shoved it into the sink, and ran out of the bathroom, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart hammered in my chest. My apartment was silent, too silent, as if the walls themselves were listening. I sat on the couch, gripping the journal, telling myself it wasn't real, that I'd imagined it, but when I looked down, the ledger had changed. A new line had been scratched into the page beneath the Bloody Mary entry. Fresh ink, fresh handwriting. He spoke her name. She knows him now. I dropped the book in shock. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely breathe. That's when I realized the truth. The ledger wasn't just recording past encounters. It was writing mine. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in the glass, smiling, whispering. And though I never dared to go back into that bathroom until morning, the mirror, I swear I could hear tapping on the other side. That was only the first story in the ledger. One legend, one warning ignored. And as I would soon learn, Bloody Mary was nothing compared to what came next. I didn't want to open the journal again. After Bloody Mary, every part of me screamed to shove it in a drawer and forget it existed. But curiosity, or maybe something darker, kept pulling me back. The next night, I lit another candle and flipped through the ledger. The ink looked fresher than before, like it was still drying. The entry I landed on made my skin crawl. She waits by the roadside. Pale dress, wet hair, hand outstretched. If you offer her a ride, she will smile, climb into the backseat, and vanish before you reach her destination. But don't look in the rear view. If you see her eyes in the mirror, she will follow you home. The vanishing hitchhiker. I'd heard that one before. The classic ghost story every small town claimed as their own. A lonely road, a lost girl, and then nothing but an empty seat. I always thought it was just folklore, a campfire tale passed around to keep kids from driving drunk. But now, with the ledger in my lap, it didn't feel like a story anymore. It felt like an invitation. Against every ounce of common sense, I drove out that night. The ledger didn't say where she'd appear, only that it would be a road you know, but barely travel. So I picked one, an old county road that wound past the edge of town, rarely used except by truckers and kids sneaking out. The night was cold. My headlights cut through a wall of mist that clung low to the pavement. My grip tightened on the wheel as I drove mile after mile with nothing but silence and fog pressing in on me. Then I saw her. She stood by the ditch, pale against the dark, her dress torn, her hair hanging wet across her face. One arm lifted slowly, fingers curling into a beckoning wave. I should have kept driving. God, I should have kept driving, but my foot eased off the gas. The car slowed, and before I could even think, I pulled over. She didn't speak, just opened the back door and slid inside. I couldn't see her face clearly in the rear view, only the outline of her shape, My heart pounded like it wanted out of my chest. Where are you headed?" My voice cracked. She didn't answer. The road stretched ahead, long and empty, the kind of silence that makes your skin itch. I kept glancing at the rear view, trying not to, but unable to stop myself. Her head was tilted down, hair covering her face. And then she smiled. I didn't see her lips move. I saw it in the reflection. My hands trembled on the wheel. I forced my eyes back on the road. 1 mile, 2 miles, then the seat was empty. No sound, no movement. She was simply gone. I almost pulled over, my breath ragged, sweat dripping down my neck. But then I remembered the ledger's warning. Do not look in the rear view. If you see her eyes in the mirror, she will follow you home. And like an idiot, I looked. For half a second, I saw them. 2 dark eyes staring back at me from the rear view, wide, unblinking. And then nothing. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the air in the car was freezing, my breath puffing white in the glow of the dashboard. Inside the house, I collapsed onto the couch, shaking. I told myself it was over, that I'd imagined it all. But when I checked the ledger, a new line had been written beneath the entry. He saw her eyes. She walks with him now. By now, I should have known better. The ledger wasn't just recording stories. It was pulling me into them, dragging me into places where folklore blurred with reality. And yet, when I flipped to the next entry, my breath caught in my throat. 2 words scrawled across the page in long, spidery handwriting. The tall one. The description was worse than the name. He watches from the tree line, a faceless man in black. Limbs too long, stretched thin like rope. If you notice him, it is already too late. He will stand where the children play. He will stand where the shadows fall. Do not run. Do not speak his name. He follows. I didn't need the ledger to tell me who it was. Slender Man. He wasn't like the others. Bloody Mary and the Hitchhiker were old, stitched into folklore long before the internet. But Slender Man was born online. A meme, a creepypasta, a digital nightmare conjured out of Photoshop and imagination. Except, if he was just fiction, why did the ledger carry his name? Why did the ink feel fresh, like it had been written just for me? That night I heard it. Not tapping, not whispers, something worse. Silence. The kind that doesn't just surround you, it presses into you, crawling beneath your skin. Even the crickets outside my window had gone still. I got up, flicked on the porch light, and froze. The woods at the edge of my yard stretched darker than usual, shadows swallowing every branch and leaf. And standing there, half hidden in the tree line, was a figure, tall, too tall. The porch light flickered. My breath hitched. He didn't move, didn't step forward. Just stood there, head tilted slightly, faceless, watching. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed away, heart jackhammering against my ribs. I told myself it was my imagination, just shadows playing tricks, a tree leaning the wrong way. But when I dared to glance out the window again, he was closer, not moving, not rushing, just closer. The air inside my house grew heavy, electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Every instinct screamed at me not to look, not to move, not to acknowledge him. And yet, the ledger sat open on my desk, its pages fluttering as if a wind blew only for it. New words formed across the paper in jagged strokes. Do not run. Do not speak. Do not breathe his name. He will come inside if you do. That was when I realized I had already spoken his name. When I turned the page in the ledger, I expected another story pulled from childhood campfires. But instead, what I found felt different. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, as if the writer had been trembling. The words barely made sense at first. If you are not careful, and you fall out of reality in the wrong places, you'll end up here. The back rooms. An endless maze of yellow halls. The smell of damp carpet. The buzz of fluorescent lights. Don't let them hear you. Don't let them see you. Don't stay too long. The back rooms. I'd read about it online. The idea that if you knocklip through the world, like in a video game, you could slip into another dimension. An infinite office space, empty and rotting, buzzing lights and moldy walls. A place you'd never escape. But the ledger described it like it was real. And before I could even laugh at the absurdity, I noticed something. The hum. Low at first, barely audible, then louder. A constant electric drone, like fluorescent bulbs straining overhead. But there were no lights on in my cabin. The power had been out for hours. I pressed my palms over my ears. The sound didn't stop. It wasn't outside. It was inside me. The floor under my feet shuddered. The walls rippled like heat waves rising from pavement. My stomach lurched. And then, without warning, I was no longer in my cabin. I was standing in a yellow hallway, stained walls, damp, sticky carpet, ceiling panels warped with water damage. The air reeked of mildew. And that hum, that constant, oppressive hum that drilled into my skull. I stumbled forward, disoriented, whispering to myself that it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Just a story, just a hoax. But the hallway kept stretching, turning corners into more of the same. Yellow walls, no windows, no doors, just an endless maze. At some point, I don't know how long I'd been walking, I thought I heard footsteps, not mine. Slow, dragging, just beyond the next corner. I froze. My throat tightened. The ledger's warning echoed in my head. Don't let them hear you. Don't let them see you. The footsteps grew closer, heavy, wet, like something barefoot dragging across the carpet. I backed away, pressed myself flat against the wall, trying to slow my breathing. Then, just around the bend, I saw it. A shadow first, stretched too long, bending in ways it shouldn't. Then movement, a figure, human-shaped, but wrong. Its limbs jerked unnaturally, head twitching side to side like a broken puppet. It stopped and turned. Even though it had no face, I knew it was looking at me. The hum of the lights grew louder. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to bend inward. And then, the ledger, somehow still clutched in my hand, flipped open on its own. Words appeared, scribbling across the page in frantic strokes. Run, so I did. Through yellow hall after yellow hall, my footsteps pounding the damp carpet, the buzzing deafening, that thing chasing close behind. And the worst part wasn't the pursuit. It was realizing, no matter how many turns I took, no matter how far I ran, the hallways never ended. When I finally stumbled out of the yellow maze, or maybe just jolted awake back in my cabin, I couldn't tell. I was shaking. My ears still rang with that unbearable hum. My hands clutched the ledger so tight, I thought I might crush it. But when I looked down, the pages had already turned. A new entry. The handwriting this time was almost neat, controlled. Like whoever wrote it wanted to make sure their warning was perfectly clear. It read, "Do not look at the picture. Do not open the file. If it finds you, it will not stop smiling until you join it." I swallowed hard. I knew what it meant. Smile dog. If you've ever spent too many nights roaming the darker corners of the internet, you've probably heard the legend. An image file that circulated on old forums. A grainy photograph of a dog, maybe a husky, maybe something else. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, teeth bared in a human grin. People said if you looked at the image, really looked, you'd start to see it everywhere. At first, just in dreams, then in shadows, then in your own reflection, until finally, you couldn't take it anymore. I told myself it was just another creepypasta, an internet ghost story, but the ledger, it had been right before. About Bloody Mary, about the Hookman, about the back rooms. And as I stared at the warning, I noticed something strange. There was a smear of ink at the bottom of the page. Not words, an image. A crude sketch of a dog, smiling. I slammed the book shut, heart pounding. But when I glanced toward the darkened window, my breath froze. There was a reflection, not mine. A dog. It sat outside the glass, its body swallowed in shadow. But its face, its mouth, stretched wide in that awful, unnatural grin. Teeth gleaming white in the moonlight. And even though the glass separated us, I swear I heard it. A voice, low and guttural, slipping through the cracks in the wood. Smile. My skin crawled. I stumbled back, whispering to myself that it wasn't real, it couldn't be real. But then I noticed the screen of my dead laptop flicker to life on its own. No power, no internet. Just one image filling the screen. The dog, the smile, grinning at me. I tore my eyes away, squeezing them shut, but the voice grew louder, not from outside, not from the laptop. From inside my own head. Smile, smile. The ledger shook in my hands, pages fluttering like wings, until it stopped on one final line, written in fresh, wet ink. You've already seen it. The ledger didn't let me catch my breath. The ink from the words about Smile Dog hadn't even dried when the pages flipped again. Faster this time, like something impatient was turning them for me. The new entry was different. Sparse, almost childlike in its scrawl. Just 4 words, written over and over. He is watching you. At first, I thought it was just repetition. But as I traced the words, I realized something. Each time he was written, the ink stretched taller, thinner, like a figure being drawn out of the page itself. I knew this story before I even wanted to admit it. Slender Man, the faceless man in the woods. Too tall, too thin. A nightmare stitched together by the internet, spreading through Photoshop contests, forum threads, whispered dares at sleepovers. But the legend grew teeth. They said he lurked where the trees grew thick, blending into the shadows, his arms long enough to touch you before you knew he was close. They said he chose children, lured them, convinced them to do unspeakable things. That once you saw him, once you knew him, he was already inside your life. I snapped the ledger shut and shoved it under my arm. I wasn't going to let this one sink its claws into me. But as I stepped outside the cabin, I froze. The woods. They had been still before. Quiet, almost dead. But now the trees seemed closer, leaning in. Branches stretching down like arms. And in the space between them, the darkness looked deeper. Denser. I told myself not to look. Don't give him power. Don't give him shape. But when something moved, tall, pale, just beyond the line of trees, my blood ran cold. He didn't walk. He didn't run. He was just there. And then closer. No face, just smooth, white nothing. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the porch steps. My chest tightened, my lungs refusing to pull in air. And then I realized the whispers had started again. Not like Smile Dog, not like the Hookman. This was different. Children's voices, high-pitched, echoing, coming from the woods all around me. He's here. He's waiting. He's ours now. I bolted back inside, slamming the cabin door, my hands shaking too badly to lock it. The ledger thudded to the floor, pages splaying wide open. On the exposed sheet, scrawled in the same childish hand, was one more message. Once you see him, he never leaves. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching my head, trying to drown out the voices outside. But in the silence between their whispers, I realized something terrifying. The creak of wood. Not from the porch. From inside the cabin, something tall, something heavy. Something that didn't need a face to stare at me. The ledger didn't give me time to recover. The whispers outside faded, the cabin's floorboards stilled, but the book pulsed in my hands like a living thing. When it opened again, the ink looked jagged, smeared like it had been written in panic. One word at the top of the page, the rake. My stomach turned. I had heard fragments of this story before. Not polished like Slender Man, not mended into every corner of the internet. This one was raw, ugly, almost feral. They said the rake was no man, no ghost, no demon you could name. Just a shape, pale skin stretched too tight, eyes too black, a mouth too wide. Naked, crouched on all fours like an animal. It didn't stalk the woods, it stalked you. Your home, your bedroom. Waiting until the world was stillest, around 3 in the morning, to crawl to your bedside and whisper your name. Sometimes it didn't even whisper. Sometimes it just sat there, watching, and those who survived swore it never left them alone. I told myself it was just another story, just another monster invented to pass around online. But when I looked down at the ledger, the words were gone. The page was blank, then, scratched into the paper like claws tearing through wood, new words carved themselves. It is already inside. The sound hit me before the fear did. A rasping breath, wet, ragged, coming from the dark hallway behind me. I didn't move, didn't want to turn my head, but my body betrayed me. Slowly, against every instinct, I turned, and I saw it. Crouched low, pale skin stretched over bones like parchment. Fingers too long, nails scraping the floorboards. Eyes that weren't eyes at all, just pits of endless black. It didn't lunge, didn't scream, it just crawled, one slow hand, then another. Nails dragging like knives on wood. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the ledger, my heart pounding loud enough to drown the sound. But not loud enough to cover what came next. A voice, not booming, not monstrous, just a rasp inches from my ear, though its body was still across the room. I've been waiting. The lights flickered. The walls groaned. And for the first time, I realized something horrifying. The rake wasn't just in my uncle's cabin. It had been in every house, every bedroom. Every night someone thought they saw a shadow at the foot of their bed. The rake wasn't summoned. It was always here. And now, it knew my name. They say if you stand in front of a mirror, in the dark, and whisper her name 3 times, something will answer. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Some people swear they've seen her face flicker in the reflection, pale, twisted, drenched in blood. Others say she reaches out from the glass and pulls you through. Most laugh it off, a party trick, something kids dare each other to do at sleepovers. But behind every harmless ritual is a history, and this one is darker than most. The roots of the Bloody Mary legend are tangled, stretching back centuries. Some believe it began with Queen Mary Tudor of England, remembered as Bloody Mary for burning hundreds of Protestants at the stake during her reign. Others point to Mary Worth, a supposed witch executed in colonial America. There are even whispers of a woman who died in childbirth, her ghost forever searching for her lost child in mirrors. No matter the origin, the ritual always remains the same. The name, the mirror, the waiting, and the outcome. Well, that depends on who you ask. One story comes from the 1970s, a group of teenage girls at a slumber party in Illinois. One of them, Nancy, insisted on doing the ritual. She lit a candle, turned off the lights, and stood before the bathroom mirror. The others giggled nervously as she said the words 3 times. At first, nothing happened. But as they leaned closer, one of the girls screamed. She swore she saw a shadow moving in the reflection behind Nancy. The candle flickered violently, then went out, plunging the room into darkness. When they scrambled to turn the lights back on, Nancy was on the floor. Her face was pale, her lips blue, as if she'd been strangled. She woke up moments later, confused, insisting she felt icy hands around her throat. Of course, skeptics dismiss stories like this. They say it's just the power of suggestion, a trick of the mind in low light. The human brain, they argue, is wired to find faces, even in shadows, even where none exist. Combine that with fear, adrenaline, and a group of kids daring each other, and it's no wonder people see things. But there are too many accounts to ignore. Parents have reported their children waking up screaming after playing the game, convinced a woman was watching them from the mirror. In some cases, mirrors have been found cracked or shattered in the morning with no explanation. Psychologists call it the Troxler effect. When you stare at your own reflection long enough, your brain begins to distort it. Your face seems to shift, melt, or morph into something unrecognizable. But believers argue, maybe that distortion isn't your mind at all. Maybe it's something pressing against the other side of the glass, waiting for you to give it a name. I'll leave you with this story from a woman in Ohio. She was 15 at the time, dared by friends to try the ritual alone. She lit her candle, said the name 3 times, and stared into the glass. At first, nothing. Then, the reflection blinked. But she hadn't. Terrified, she dropped the candle and ran. The mirror, she swears, cracked down the middle on its own. Now, decades later, she says she can't keep mirrors in her house. Every time she looks too long, she sees the faint outline of a woman standing just behind her shoulder. So the next time someone dares you, remember this. Some rituals are older than you think, and when you speak a name into the dark, sometimes the dark whispers back. Unlike tales whispered for centuries, this one didn't start in candlelit rooms or around campfires. It began on a computer screen, June 10, 2009. On a forum called Something Awful, users were competing in a Photoshop contest to create the creepiest supernatural images possible. One user, Eric Knudsen, posting under the name Victor Surge, submitted 2 black and white photos. Each showed children at play, with something lurking in the background. Tall, faceless, dressed in black. Arms impossibly long, watching, waiting. Underneath, Knudsen added snippets of fictional eyewitness accounts, suggesting the entity was tied to missing children and strange, unexplained events. And just like that, Slender Man was born. It should have stayed a simple internet creation. But the thing about urban legends is this: once a story resonates, it takes on a life of its own. People began writing elaborate accounts, sharing drawings, creating found footage videos. Slender Man seeped into every corner of the web, from creepypasta forums to YouTube series like Marble Hornets, which turned him into a true nightmare figure. The rules were simple. He appears in forests, abandoned buildings, or the edges of photographs. He stalks his victims slowly, watching from a distance. His presence causes paranoia, static interference, and sickness. And worst of all, he targets children. But then, something horrifying happened. The legend escaped the internet. In 2014, 2 12-year-old girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin, lured their classmate into the woods and stabbed her 19 times. Their reason? They claimed Slender Man told them to do it. They believed that by serving him, they could become his proxies and live in his mansion deep in the forest. The victim miraculously survived, crawling to a roadside where a cyclist found her. The attackers were later tried and sentenced, but the event stunned the world. A monster born in a Photoshop contest had crossed into reality, not because he was real, but because belief gave him power. And that's the terrifying thing about modern urban legends. They spread faster than ghost stories ever could. They're born in seconds, multiplied by millions of clicks, shared in whispers of comment threads and late-night chats. And once they lodge in our minds, they're hard to shake. Even today, people swear they've seen Slender Man in the woods. Grainy photos, shaky videos, long arms stretching out of the trees, faceless head glowing pale in the dark. Skeptics laugh, pointing to pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist. But ask anyone who's truly convinced, and they'll tell you Slender Man is more than a meme. He's a modern boogeyman, proof that even in the digital age, we still hunger for monsters in the dark. So when you're walking alone at night, and you catch the outline of a tall figure between the trees, don't stare too long, because sometimes the things we create start looking back. Unlike tales whispered for centuries, this one didn't start in candlelit rooms or around campfires. It began on a computer screen, June 10, 2009. On a forum called Something Awful, users were competing in a Photoshop contest to create the creepiest supernatural images possible. One user, Eric Knudsen, posting under the name Victor Surge, submitted 2 black and white photos. Each showed children at play, with something lurking in the background. Tall, faceless, dressed in black. Arms impossibly long, watching, waiting. Underneath, Knudsen added snippets of fictional eyewitness accounts, suggesting the entity was tied to missing children and strange, unexplained events. And just like that, Slender Man was born. It should have stayed a simple internet creation. But the thing about urban legends is this: once a story resonates, it takes on a life of its own. People began writing elaborate accounts, sharing drawings, creating found footage videos. Slender Man seeped into every corner of the web, from creepypasta forums to YouTube series like Marble Hornets, which turned him into a true nightmare figure. The rules were simple. He appears in forests, abandoned buildings, or the edges of photographs. He stalks his victims slowly, watching from a distance. His presence causes paranoia, static interference, and sickness. And worst of all, he targets children. But then, something horrifying happened. The legend escaped the internet. In 2014, 2 12-year-old girls in Waukesha, Wisconsin, lured their classmate into the woods and stabbed her 19 times. Their reason? They claimed Slender Man told them to do it. They believed that by serving him, they could become his proxies and live in his mansion deep in the forest. The victim miraculously survived, crawling to a roadside where a cyclist found her. The attackers were later tried and sentenced, but the event stunned the world. A monster born in a Photoshop contest had crossed into reality, not because he was real, but because belief gave him power. And that's the terrifying thing about modern urban legends. They spread faster than ghost stories ever could. They're born in seconds, multiplied by millions of clicks, shared in whispers of comment threads and late-night chats. And once they lodge in our minds, they're hard to shake. Even today, people swear they've seen Slender Man in the woods. Grainy photos, shaky videos, long arms stretching out of the trees, faceless head glowing pale in the dark. Skeptics laugh, pointing to pareidolia, the brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist. But ask anyone who's truly convinced, and they'll tell you Slender Man is more than a meme. He's a modern boogeyman, proof that even in the digital age, we still hunger for monsters in the dark. So when you're walking alone at night, and you catch the outline of a tall figure between the trees, don't stare too long, because sometimes the things we create start looking back. Some urban legends strike fear because they whisper about the supernatural. Others terrify us because they could so easily be real. This is one of those stories. It's late. You're driving home alone. The highway is nearly empty, the streetlights throwing long shadows across the pavement. You check your rearview mirror and there's a car behind you. Its headlights seem a little too close. At first you ignore it, but then the driver flashes their brights. Once, twice, over and over. Annoyed, maybe even a little nervous, you press harder on the gas. The car stays with you, lights flashing more urgently now. Finally, you pull into your driveway or a gas station, ready to confront the lunatic tailgating you. That's when the driver behind you leaps out and shouts the words that make your blood run cold. Don't move. There's someone in your back seat. The story goes that a killer was hiding in your car the entire time. Every time they tried to sit up with a knife, the driver behind you flashed their brights to make them duck back down. The annoying tailgater wasn't harassing you, they were saving your life. It's one of the most famous urban legends in America, dating back to at least the 1960s. And while the details shift depending on who tells it, the message is always the same: check your backseat before you drive. But here's the thing, this isn't just a story. There are real cases that eerily resemble the legend. In 1964, A New York woman named Evelyn Kalan was driving home when she was murdered by a man who had been hiding in her car. In the 1990s, police reports surfaced of carjackers and killers using this exact method, slipping into an unlocked vehicle while the driver wasn't looking. The story spread fast, fueled by genuine fear. Police departments even began issuing safety warnings. Always lock your doors and always check the back seat. Pop culture kept it alive too. The legend has been featured in horror anthologies, TV shows like Supernatural, and countless scary storybooks. Because it's not about ghosts, demons, or monsters. It's about something far scarier. The idea that a human being, silent, patient, waiting with a knife in hand, could be inches from you without you knowing. So tonight, after you hear this story, when you unlock your car in the dark, when you slide into the driver's seat, will you check your mirror? Will you glance at the back seat? Because legends live on for a reason. Sometimes they're warnings. Some urban legends feel like they were designed to prey on our deepest, simplest fears. And this one is every babysitter's nightmare. The story usually begins the same way. A teenage babysitter is watching over two children in a large, quiet house. The parents have gone out for the evening, leaving her with strict instructions and a number to call if she needs anything. The night starts uneventfully. She puts the kids to bed upstairs, then settles onto the couch with snacks and the TV remote. For a while, everything feels perfectly normal. Until the phone rings. The babysitter answers, expecting the parents. Instead, a strange voice whispers, "Have you checked the children?" She hangs up, unnerved but determined not to let it rattle her. A prank call, she thinks. Just kids being stupid. But a few minutes later, the phone rings again. Same voice, same words. This time slower, drawn out. Minutes later, the phone rings. "Have you checked the children?" Fear starts to settle in. She calls the police, who tell her they'll trace the call if it happens again. She picks it up, handshaking. The voice hisses, more menacing than ever, "I'm coming for the children." This time, she doesn't hang up. The police trace the call and come back with the words that freeze her blood. The call is coming from inside the house. Suddenly, the legend changes from unsettling to horrific. The babysitter realizes the intruder isn't some faraway menace. He's already inside, watching her from the shadows, only steps away from the children she was meant to protect. The origins of this story go back decades. Folklorists trace it as far back as the 1960s, passed among teenagers like a whispered warning. But what gave it such power was how real it felt. Many babysitters worked alone at night, often in unfamiliar houses. They had the phone, the television, and their imagination, the perfect breeding ground for a story like this to take root. And while the call from inside the house twist has become almost cliché in horror movies, it comes from very real crimes. In 1950, a case in Columbia, Missouri, saw a 13-year-old girl murdered while babysitting. In the 1970s, several documented cases of home intruders hiding inside houses fed directly into the legend spread. Hollywood, of course, cemented it. The 1979 film, When a Stranger Calls, burned the line. The call is coming from inside the house into popular culture. Since then, countless adaptations have kept the legend alive. But at its core, the fear is timeless. Being responsible for innocent lives, being alone in the dark, and realizing the danger isn't out there. It is already in the room with you. So the next time you hear a creak upstairs, or a phone rings when it shouldn't, you might just remember this story and wonder if the voice on the other end is closer than you think. They say her name in whispers, 3 times in the dark, standing before a mirror. It sounds childish at first, like a playground dare, the kind of thing kids chant at sleepovers just to spook each other. But those who've tried it, they'll tell you it isn't a game. The legend of Bloody Mary is one of the oldest and most universal urban legends in America, and maybe even the world. The rules are simple. 1. Turn off the lights. 2. Stand in front of a mirror. 3. Light a single candle. 4. And whisper her name. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. What happens next? That's where the stories splinter. Some say her face will appear in the glass, pale, bloodied, eyes full of rage. Others say she scratch your skin, leaving marks that burn for days. A few claim she'll drag you through the mirror, trapping you forever in her world of broken reflections. But the scariest part? No one agrees on who she actually is. Some legends say she was a murdered woman, left to rot in silence, her spirit forever bound to glass. Others claim she was a witch, executed centuries ago, her curse passed down through mirrors. And then there's the historical tie to Queen Mary I of England, nicknamed Bloody Mary for the execution she ordered. But whether witch, ghost, or queen, one thing unites every version. If you call her, she will answer. Ask anyone who has stood in a dark bathroom at midnight, candle flickering, eyes locked on their reflection. They'll tell you, the mirror isn't just reflecting back, it's waiting, watching, and maybe, if you look long enough, if you're foolish enough to whisper the words, you'll see something that isn't you staring back. Pause. Now let me tell you a story. A girl I knew in high school tried it once. Just a joke, she said. Just to prove it was fake. She went into the bathroom, turned out the lights, lit her candle, and whispered the name 3 times. The rest of us waited outside, giggling nervously. At first, nothing. Then we heard her gasp. The candle inside flickered, and then silence. We burst in, laughing, but she wasn't laughing. She was pale, trembling, staring at the mirror like she couldn't look away. When we finally pulled her out, she whispered, "She was behind me." We thought it was a joke, but when we turned the lights on, her cheek had 3 deep scratches, raw and red, like fingernails dragged across her skin. And here's the thing. Weeks later, she covered all the mirrors in her house. Sheets, towels, anything she could find. She said she couldn't stand the thought of catching a glimpse of her again, because once you see her, she never really leaves. So tonight, if you find yourself walking down a dark hall and you catch your reflection in a mirror, don't stare too long, don't whisper her name, because the legend says that's when she whispers yours back. He's not a ghost from centuries past, not a witch from folklore, not even a spirit whispered about by our grandparents. The Slender Man is different, because he was born not in firelight stories or candlelit rituals, but online. In 2009, a simple Photoshop contest on an internet forum asked users to create paranormal images. One stood out, a tall, faceless man in a black suit, looming in the background of old photographs. He was called Slender Man. It should have ended there, just another piece of internet creepypasta. But stories spread, more photos, more sightings. Then came the videos, the fan-made documentaries, the whispers that children had seen him watching from the tree line. The rules? They were never clear. But they all agreed on one thing: Slender Man stalks. He follows. He waits at the edge of the woods or at the corner of your vision, impossibly tall, faceless, silent. And if you notice him too often, if you talk about him too much, he gets closer. Some dismissed it as harmless storytelling. But then came the chilling real-life consequences. In 2014, 2 12-year-old girls in Wisconsin lured their friend into the woods and stabbed her, claiming it was a sacrifice to Slender Man. She survived, but the act sent shockwaves across the world. Because suddenly, this internet-born monster wasn't just pixels and imagination. He had leapt from the screen into reality. Slender Man is proof of something terrifying, that urban legends don't just haunt our past. They evolve, they adapt. And they can be born right here, in our modern age, through screens we look at every day. Pause. Think about it. Bloody Mary comes from mirrors, the hook man from lonely roads, the vanishing hitchhiker from midnight highways. And Slender Man? He comes from the internet, the modern mirror we stare into for hours. And maybe that's the scariest part. Because if a legend can spread so quickly online, if it can burrow into our minds and twist into something real, then what other monsters are we summoning every time we tell their stories? So tonight, we've traveled through myths, whispers, and warnings. We've wandered dark roads, peered into cursed mirrors, sat at empty tables, and stood in the woods staring into shadows. Each story we've unraveled wasn't just about fear, it was about the power of fear. Urban legends live because we breathe life into them. Every time we tell them, we make them stronger. Every time we whisper their names, we invite them closer. And maybe that's why they'll never die. Because no matter how much we pretend not to believe, late at night, in the silence of an empty room, we all still wonder, was that just a shadow? Or something more? So the next time you're out alone and you hear footsteps behind you, or see a figure standing at the edge of the trees, don't be so quick to dismiss it. Because legends have a way of finding you. Closing beat, slow, ominous. This has been Unraveling the Secrets of Urban Legends. Thank you for listening. Sleep well tonight. If you can.